Hello everyone, I am Mr. Rain, and today I'm joined with a friend of mine, John Coday. If you go ahead and
Hello.
so yes, go ahead, John, and just introduce yourself. Tell us, a little bit about yourself.
Yes, so I am a comic book writer and illustrator. I've been doing that for a couple years now. Creating a webtoon called Sierra Bell, The Matrix Curse. I also do Twitch live streams on John Coday as well. Um, and a spattering of other things here and there.
Yep.
Oh, and a YouTube channel as well, with video essays talking about different things like anime or video games or different things like that.
Exactly, and that's one of the big reasons why I wanted you on this because of those essays and just you know, really wanted to see what your opinion is on the topic. So
In terms of the observations, yeah.
exactly. So today we are talking about The Last of Us 2 and all the controversy that comes with it. Um,
And there's a lot.
a fair bit of it. And what I wanted to go about is the people were throwing you know were being I'm trying to keep my thoughts together. But yeah, they were getting upset at the director, they were getting upset at the voice actor of Abby, even though the voice actor has nothing to do with how her character is written. And that's one illusion that I think a lot of people have to get out of their system, where yeah, actors may have some input on their character, but it's not going to be to the point where the entire story of that character is written because of that actor. It's very rare where an entire storyline's written
It's a
for
yeah.
that.
Sometimes voice actors have a little bit of sway, probably in like the dialect maybe, but other than that, um, I think probably the best example would actually be hilariously enough, oh Forrest Gump. Whenever Tom Hanks was when they had brought a kid on to uh, and I can't even to be young Forrest Gump, and so
Okay.
the kid had like a very like that thick accent, and so he's like, well, why don't I just talk like the kid instead? And that's usually about the extent of it. There's sometimes some writers are pretty lenient with like allowing a voice actor to change it a little bit, but usually it's about that much.
Right. It usually just is how they're delivering the dialogue, and not so much
Yeah.
rewriting the entire script for that character. But overall, death threats should never be given to anyone,
Oh,
in
absolutely
this
not.
industry. It's already tough as it is to get into it, and people are going to pick up roles that aren't going to be liked, and they're just going to have some roles that are going to be a little more controversial.
Ryan Reynolds and Green Lantern.
So, exactly. And it's
I
yeah,
watched a
he
thing on that
accepted it,
today.
and he hates it ever since he accepted it. How is he supposed to know how the suit and everything's going to look like when all he has to do is literally just wear the green suit, the other green suit that's going to get plastered onto him later on. So, yeah, there's no reason to send death threats to any of these people. But if you really wanted to put blame at someone, always, it's usually start from the top down. With the writers, directors, and then producers, publishers, just
Yeah.
everything before you get to
If they,
the
yeah.
actors and developers. Because everyone under those people are just more or less cogs in the wheel. Not to diminish what they do.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
they're absolutely necessary.
they're absolutely necessary and they do a great job, and that's why they're hired in the first place. So, you can't blame
But not
them for following the what would it be?
following the lead of the others, I guess.
Yeah, the lead of the others, direction of the others. I had a sense. I always forget that word every single time I want to say it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, based on like how it works, and it's not like we're trying to also downplay the writers themselves as well, because it is also still something that is put a lot of thought into. There are, to me, I think there's a few factors into kind of what happened and why it is the case, and we'll kind of get into that here in a bit.
absolutely.
But the writers did pour a lot, not only in the first game but also into the second game. They had a lot of they tried to do a lot of care into the writing. So
Indeed. And so uh, I'm going to tangent off a little bit because I do want to go ahead and like just give my own preference to The Last of Us as a franchise, I guess, or series. And so it is a zombie horror survival game that, or genre, I guess. And of course, that genre comes with a lot of shock elements and jump scares and things like that. And I know this is, a little bit of that. I don't know if you could say it has a little bit of Resident Evil in its DNA with, lack of supplies and whatnot. Um, but what I will say is that it's just not my kind of genre. It's not my kind of game. It's not really my kind of story overall. But the reason why I want to talk about it is because I can still admire like all the hard work that's behind these characters and the writing behind it and all of that. And it's like, yeah, I'm not a big fan of it, but I'm not going to go out and say that this is really bad or this is really controversial because it's exactly what I expect out of it, out of a genre like this. Um, the only other thing to mention with that would be like I think with The Last of Us 1, the reason why I didn't get into that was because I watched like the first 30 minutes and basically I was done. I didn't want to watch anymore. Um, I guess a light spoiler. I mean, we are, if you don't mind, we would be going into spoilers. I should have mentioned that
Yeah.
before going into that. But
I'm like at this point, like I've at least watched and I've seen quite a bit of gameplay. I played a little bit of it myself, and I've uh, watched the majority of it. I'm pretty much caught up
okay,
with it. So
that's good. So yeah, at the beginning of Last of Us 1, very minor spoiler alert. The main character in that starts with a J. I already forgot the freaking name.
Joel.
Joel. Thank you. I was going to say Jones. It's like it's not Jones. It's Joel. Okay, so Joel's daughter dies very early on before you even really get a chance to learn the game, and then she gets replaced with Ellie, and then he spends the entire game with helping Ellie survive all of this, and she ends up also having immunity through like the infected. But like that first part was like when I saw that part of Joel's daughter dying in his arms, it's like I know what kind of game this is. It's not for me. And for me, I do feel like it would be a lot stronger of a story if the daughter actually did survive, and it was like a sisterhood between Joel's daughter and Ellie, and then Joel being completely out of his comfort zone, not knowing how to deal with like two little girls in the middle of this zombie apocalypse. And that kind of back and forth that unfortunately it's not going to happen because of how it's written.
uh,
But I don't know. What do you
I
think of that?
I kind of have the opposite feeling about that actually. I think that and this is why in terms like of a in terms of like a writer's sense, I guess. Um, with Joel's daughter originally dying, he then has Ellie as a replacement daughter figure. So then he's not really attached to her at the beginning, but over time that attachment becomes a little bit more apparent. So then he's kind of using Ellie as that daughter figure, which then is able to lead into some of the events and some of the stuff that happens towards the end of The Last of Us Part 1, and then as well as the beginning of Part 2. And I'm like, it's kind of a given. Killing characters is kind of a, I guess, writer's joy, because usually it's some kind of, but I'm like, for the most part, like it's kind of one of those tools where it kind of gives a little bit of a backstory to it,
Right.
to why a character does certain things. To a certain extent, maybe as if Joel still had the daughter, maybe he wouldn't have taken Ellie in. Maybe he would have just passed Ellie on to someone else, and then we would be seeing something else. So I don't know. That's just kind of me.
I know, and like, it's one of those like critical thinking things. It's not like there's an absolute correct answer. You know, and with
Yeah.
me, like I said, I'm not the one that's really going to be best to like think about how to write a story like this. But I was always thinking that in the back of my head, like I know because the thing that hits me is that yeah, Ellie does replace his daughter as the daughter figure, but at the end of the day, it's not her, it's not his daughter, you know. And I just
Yeah,
feel
at the
like
end of the day, it isn't. Yeah.
right, and I just feel like that connection is just not going to be as strong as it would, even though he is doing everything that he would normally do otherwise. But just in the back of my
When
head,
he towards the end of the last, or at the end of The Last of Us, and at the beginning, he just goes in, guns blazing into that
yeah,
doctor's office, and it's like, yeah, that's something a father figure would do for a
exactly,
daughter. Like,
exactly,
absolutely, that's something that.
right.
And
I'm sorry,
I would
go ahead.
also like to point out like something else about Joel that, which was pointed out to my roommate. My roommate is a really big fan of The Last of Us, and something that he pointed out to me, which I 100% agree with, is that Joel is not a hero.
No, no, he's
A
not.
lot of people, I think a lot of times, a lot of people tend to kind of see him as a hero, but based on a lot of his actions and based on some of the things that he doesn't always act like a stand-up kind of hero kind of character.
Exactly.
He just doesn't. He's kind of looking out for not only himself but also for Ellie.
Right.
Um, so even though they do go over to the Fireflies to potentially make a cure, in the end it would have costed her life, and so then he's just like, screw it, we're not going to deal with that.
Exactly.
So,
So
which
yeah,
is what a father would do.
absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, that's just like my own headcanon, like in the back of my head. You know, I understand like what's going on with that, but it's just very hard for me to like keep piece that in my head, like have make the bridge connection between that and the other. Uh, so yeah, let's go ahead and let's talk about Last of Us 2, which is the actual um, topic. But I just really wanted to go into that because like this is all this is, just like a little bit of critical thinking.
I think, yeah, Last of Us 2 definitely got hit pretty hard.
Yeah,
And one of the main things that did happen pretty early on, before the game was even released, was some major leaks
yep,
happened. Um, and I don't know if it's been clarified or not. It probably still isn't. I kind of tried to look into it not uh, earlier to see if there was anything, but there were some pretty major leaks, pretty major story stuff that was just basically thrown out,
yeah,
which basically ruined the story of the game.
yeah,
So it was hard to be able to judge based off of that. So then a lot of reviews and a lot of critiques
right,
on it were hit pretty hard with
right.
that in the back of everyone's minds, which does suck. It really does.
It does, it does.
Having games leaked. I remember an interview about whenever Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battles got leaked pretty hard, and it was a nightmare for the developers. It was just a nightmare for them. So, but I mean, the lucky thing for them is that the game still got pretty well received, whereas
Right,
this one didn't. But that's because, in terms of the difference between the two, I feel like is there was not quite everything was leaked with Kingdom Battle. Um, some stuff was, but not very much. With The Last of Us, basically one of the main core things of it was thrown out
exactly,
there. So,
exactly. And that's the thing. Like I said, that's I do also feel that like that's just part of that genre as well. Like spoilers, us always going to hurt, especially when it's about very critical points of the story.
of the story.
But it's even more so when it's in the genre like this, where it is survival horror zombie genre. A Walking Dead esque type storyline where things bad things are going to happen, and then you're never and that, like you said, that's the fun part of writing, when you're able to like get that uh, kind of emotion out of the readers or players. But it's very hard
Yeah.
for people to actually like comprehend that when they're playing it out of context, and then but I also do feel that even though it was sent out of context, we'll get to it in a second, because I do want to put up another spoiler warning when we get to The Last of Us 2 spoilers. Is I do think a lot of what the reason why The Last of Us 2 is a very hard game to like get through Aside from like pacing issues, I think it's also due to directing and being able to control certain characters at a certain point when there's not really a motivation to actually play them. You know.
It does put like some form of interesting perspective in terms of like seeing things through another character, see what they're like. But I think like
Right.
kind of shifting that, especially with a character, like I believe Abby was her name that you shift to, um, because not too long ago something major happens and you're
Right.
not really liking Abby all that much,
Exactly.
and then all of a sudden you're playing as Abby and you're just like, oh crap.
Yeah.
So
And that
on,
could
on one hand it
go
on
ahead.
one hand it does, sorry about that, on one hand it does like shock the player a little bit, and it kind of
Hmm.
it's just like, wait, what is going on? And on the other it's just kind of like, oh, I really don't want to be doing this, and that can,
Exactly.
to some people, that can really kind of turn off someone in terms of that kind of stuff, especially with those types of characters.
Right. And like it can work, but I do really feel that you need to have like the motivation to get to that point. And it's something that I'm going to ruin this guy's name. Jeremy Jahns. Jeremy Jahns is another YouTuber. He does a lot of reviews, like very quick 5-minute reviews of movies primarily, but he also reviewed this game. And I do agree with some of his points, where it's like it makes sense, with uh, having to play as Abby, but at the same time, it's you gotta have that motivation behind it. Like, why are you controlling this character? Why should you
Yeah,
care about controlling this character?
yeah, you can't just throw someone in and it's just like, wait, what's going on now? So
Yeah.
I think that kind of threw everyone else, especially considering that most of the marketing in the game also
Hmm.
focused on playing as Ellie.
So we can get into the marketing, because I actually didn't actually realize what they did with the marketing until like I was actually told about it. Um,
Yeah, their marketing was mainly about Ellie.
right. The marketing was mainly about Ellie, but then they also made it seem like it was going to be like another Ellie and Joel uh, adventure. And so uh, what had happened was that they had taken clips and they were using them out of order to create that kind of perspective. And when it turns out that that's not going to be the case, that's when a lot of the backlash started to happen on top of the spoilers.
In
So
terms of a writing, so yeah, spoilers ahead for this because I'm gonna kind
yes,
of go into it a little
start
bit.
off with that.
Um, yeah, spoiler. So I mean, like, of course, this whole video is
Right. From here
spoiler
on out,
insanity.
from
So,
here on out it's true hardcore spoilers. All right, everything's on the table.
yeah. Um, in terms of like a writing, in terms of like kind of faking out the people with the marketing, um, I do see something interesting with it in turn from like both a writing and a marketing standpoint. But there is a point of like, especially with a character like Joel, because I'm like even though like I wouldn't consider him a hero, I think a lot of people do really like his character. And with a character like that, if you kill him and you advertise um that you're going to be playing with him as well throughout the story, I don't know if that's the best thing.
Right.
Especially kind of looking at it from a little bit more of an outside view, I guess. Um, just because like with the type of character, or not the type of character that he is, but how liked of a character that he is, and his importance in the story
Right.
throughout The Last of Us One.
Yeah, definitely. Um, but yeah, so like I said, we are in spoiler territory, so you know we
Oh
can.
yeah, Joel dies.
Yeah, Joel dies. So
I was
Joel,
planning on saying that throughout whenever I was talking about that, and I just never did. That was great.
it was good. You did mention it, just like not, you know, you didn't highlight it, but you did mention it.
Yeah.
Um, but the thing with Joel, you know, she is a neat character. She's definitely one that you see like a very broken character looking for redemption. That kind of a storyline, which is always
Yeah.
a great storyline to follow, only to realize that it's going to get cut short in The Last of Us 2. Now, like I was saying with that directing, it was obviously about Abby and then having to control her. And like even her introduction when they first, when you first start playing as her, she doesn't really come off as a likable character. I don't think. I don't know,
And
but what do you
she's
think?
kind of I mean, like, she's kind of like a teenager character. She's been through a lot. I mean, it's kind of one of those characters where it's just like she kind of acts that way, and you kind of understand why. It's kind of like the character or the so best way I can explain it is someone who has dealt with a lot of like issues throughout their lives and stuff like that. They act a certain way because that's mostly what they've experienced. That can probably be about the same thing for Ellie. She's experienced a lot throughout the not only Last of Us but also throughout the beginnings of the Last of Us 2 with Joel dying and everything like that. So it's to me it's kind of like an understanding of just kind of like her character and the way she acts and some of the stuff that she does.
Right. So yeah, that's the thing. It's hard to be able to, like as a player, to be able to understand that without that context, and to know that the game does go into that context. The more you play it, and it's fine to have like mystery behind characters and their motives, but it's very difficult when you're trying to play as that character without having that motive, without knowing about that motive.
Yeah,
Um, and like I said, it's not that you can't play as a controversial or a bad player. It's just that it has to be done in a setting where it's a little more controlled, I guess.
yeah.
Where in a way where it's like their character's already set up to be this kind of character. And with Abby, I don't think they gave her enough room to breathe before, you know.
Before you, yeah, yeah, I can see
Exactly.
that.
So yeah,
You didn't really know much about Abby um until everything happened, and then it's just like, whoop, now you're Abby, and it's like, hang on a second.
exactly.
So yeah,
Um,
and then as you play as Abby, you then slowly kind of begin to learn that stuff.
right.
So
And then like the other thing is, and so like I was saying, this kind of storytelling, it's not bad. Like if you were to just watch it, and if you're someone that likes that kind of story and that kind of genre, like you're not really gonna have a whole lot of issues watching it. I don't think. I just think more is like if you have to be the person that actually has to go through with those actions, it's a little harder because again, it's just like you're just thrown into it. Where in a movie or a show or anything else, it's perfectly fine because you're always, the one watching it. Just you're always the spectator,
kind of like the outsider looking on in.
right? And in this case, it's no, you are the person, even though you have no idea who this person is.
I think this is kind of like one of my own, like, I guess, like, thoughts, and I kind of I have a little bit harder time classifying Last of Us 2 in this category, mainly because it does do some different things with the gameplay. It really does.
Yeah,
But a lot of like storytelling games and a lot more cinematic games, I just have a hard time really touching or doing anything with, because I play a video game to play a video game. I recently started, um, excuse me, I recently started playing on stream a game called Ori and the Blind Forest, and it plays. I was making a bunch of comments about it. It plays beautifully. Ori is so fun to control, and as you go through the game, it gets even more and more fun.
right,
So, being able to do something interesting about the gameplay and also be able to build on that gameplay is also really important. The other thing about Ori is that Ori does tell a really good story. Ori does have a really good story, so it's not hard to be able to include a story into a game.
right.
Um, I I'm trying to think of some other good examples. Half-Life actually is a really good example. The Half-Life series is a really, really good example of that.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, it's classified as a first-person shooter, but I mean, like it just does some really interesting stuff. I feel like and to be fair, Last of Us and Last of Us 2 are really beautiful games. They are very, very well done, and down to about next to everything. But it's just kind of like it's one of the few things that like I think especially video games really need to pay attention to more is the gameplay aspect of games. And I because of just kind of the nature of cinematic games, I don't know how much you can break that. And I think it's just kind of that kind of curse of that genre.
Right. And I do agree. Like, you can tell a really good story and a really compelling story in a video game, regardless of what. And like, that's my own personal belief. There's no reason why you can't. But it's not so much that you can't about the story. It's more, I think, it's just more about how you direct that story. And like,
Right.
one of my favorite games of all time is Max Payne, and Max Payne 1 and 2 primarily. And the thing is that it has a very straightforward story, and you can kind of piece things together and try, like Max Payne 1, you can't really understand what's going on. You're basically lost, just like the main character. But what's neat is that in Max Payne 1, you're essentially, you're being told a story, and then you're directing the action scenes. You're directing the action sequences. And I felt that's a fun way to like tell a story because yeah, you're not really you're doing stuff that keeps progressing the story, but you're in charge of like how those scenes play out and how well or how janky they become. And it's a very like segregated, like a very split off type of way to tell a story, but it works on a basic level. And then what's neat is that in Max Payne 2, you have this story that's kind of being told a little bit out of order until like 5 or 6 levels in, and then by
Yeah.
that point, like I played Max Payne 2 the first time, and I wasn't really impressed. I didn't really understand it. Like, and then I realized that when on my second and even my third playthrough was that you can actually piece together um, the different things that are going on throughout the game, from the cutscenes and from like the dialogue and all that. And that what you realize is that they're both noir stories, but where in the first one where you couldn't really figure out what was going on, the second one it gets to the point where it's painfully obvious, and then it it can be a backfire a little bit even in that game because I think Max Payne 2 is just not as accepted from the community as a as the best game. But what's neat is that like there's always little nuances in the cutscenes or in the so like in a certain part where you're watching, the dialogue go through. Like one of the side characters is on a phone in the background, and all you hear is like her phone going off as she's picking it up as she's talking, and she's talking like at a low voice, and then it kind of dawns on you, and then when you play it a second time or a third time, it's like, okay, now I know what that conversation's about. And now I realize that she knew about this during this part, which is why she shows up 10 minutes later in another part of the game.
Yeah.
So it's not that you can't
Different.
tell
Yeah.
a cool story or convoluted story, just that it really comes down, I feel, to like how you direct it, which can be very tricky when you're giving the
Yeah.
player control.
How you direct it alongside of a video game,
Right.
because it is, you're trying to essentially do a insane balancing act of that. So.
So yeah, and
Uh,
there's
all
another.
right.
So do you know like the ending, like the last fight that goes on?
Uh, I'm trying to remember because I think I have seen it, but I can't remember.
I'm not looking for like super details. I'm just asking like if you know like who the last fight
Yeah,
is
I
in
don't.
between the two.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head right now. I just can't.
Do
I
you mind if I spoil it?
don't mind at all.
All right. So the last fight is between Ellie and Abby, And
Right.
guess who you play as in that fight?
Do you play as Abby?
Yes, you play as Abby in that fight. So, which
Uh,
just feels so backwards in like the way
yeah.
a story like that would be written. And like I was saying with Jeremy Jahns, he mentioned that last fight, and it was saying that the first thing he did when he went into that fight as Abby was literally just stand still and get shot at till he died. It was like perfect. Cut to the credits. We're done here. And so and I mean
At
like I
least
do
finish the yeah. It's kind of one of those. It's like at least finish the game out with the cover character.
right. And like he
I will say
was
that much.
yeah. And I do like highly recommend like checking out Jeremy Jahns because he's a really cool guy. He's real easy to listen to and watch. He's very entertaining. But like everything that he had to say about this, like for the most part, I can agree. Like Abby needed more screen time before, she killed Joel.
Before
Um,
jumping into that.
and that like certain parts of things dragged a little bit. Ellie never feels like a fully completed character, even if that is the design of her story. That she's never really going to be fully, uh, she's never really going to have that payoff. But it's just that kind of feeling of, you know, it's like in a game, in a survival thing like this. I feel that if you're going for something serious, I think, and this is again coming from way outside in, from someone who doesn't care about this genre a whole lot. I think like one of the key things that you're supposed to like one of the key messages you're supposed to have in a series like this, aside from motivation, is literally hope. And just hope that you can redeem yourself, hope that you can become a better person, and so on and so on. And I just don't feel like that's the kind of message that was trying to be sent. And it felt like it was just more like a drama, just that a drama that so happened to be set up in a post-apocalyptic zombie survival game.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying, like I said, I don't think it's bad. I don't think the story itself is bad, but I can very much understand like why there's so much backlash and why people don't like it. And it's just
I-
a controversial type of story.
It's just kind of like one of those things. I will say, in terms of not only Last of Us One as well as Part Two, I must say, why is it that only video games, anime, and I was thinking of something else. Uh, yeah, like video games and manga and like indie stuff can be able to write female characters correctly and in an interesting way. Why is it that like Hollywood and like budget and like big movies and some television shows do it well, but not
Right.
quite that well? I've not seen anything yet. But like, why is it so hard for America to be able to write female characters correctly? What is going on here?
Yeah.
So, and I think The Last of Us throughout one and two, with Ellie as a main character, I think like there's a few flaws with Kelly, with not Kelly. Good lord, Ellie's writing. Um, Ellie's writing is really well, and as a main female role, especially in that kind of position, I think she's really done really well. And I mean, like, that's points for me because it's like, yes, like, finally, yes. So, the only other movie that I know of that has a main female role that does it well is Wonder Woman. That's it. But yeah, I think that that's just kind of like another like bit of like a 2 cents thing for me. Probably just like my own like little personal preference.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, I think we've been talking. I think I got enough of what I really wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And and like I said, it's not really a genre that's for me, but it's also like I'm just interested in these kind of stories and like just saying that if you really do like this kind of stuff, I don't think it's that bad of a thing. But you just have to go in it really, almost like detaching yourself from thinking you're playing a game and more of like you're just in a interactive movie, I
Yeah.
guess. I think one thing that could have been done on a gameplay scale, because I know like that could be one big thing, like not just the directing and which gameplay you play, but even if it's not really in the heart of The Last of Us 2 or The Last of Us series in regards to gameplay, I do feel you need to give like different characters certain abilities, and I don't know if that's actually even in the game. I don't.
With the type of game that it is, and with the setting and kind of how it's styled, I don't know how well that would be done. So
Because I'm thinking like
that's
even if it's just a unique weapon, a unique weapon
right.
of
Yeah,
some sort, just something where it's like, okay, I'm not just mashing square all the time. It's like I don't
yeah.
know,
It's yeah, yeah. I can see that.
because like when the gameplay is very simple, then you're focusing on the characters or the difficulty of the game or a combination of both. But like if the gameplay is unique, where each character handles slightly differently, each one has like their own quirk about them, you know, how one
Yeah.
way or another. And it would have been neat to have Abby like have a little more, have some. I don't know if she had like her own unique animations for like taking down zombies or not.
I believe she did.
She did, but
Yeah.
it's just something like that where if you can give the player like some kind of input where it's like, okay, I can use Abby because she deals, because she has a certain play style behind her.
Yeah.
I think that's like something you can see behind. I mean, talking apples to oranges and something controversial like this. It's not that I'm trying to compare one and the other. It's just saying, what if you took something like how each character in Final Fantasy VII kind of fills a role because it's a role-playing game, but like where one's a healer, one's a tank, one's a brawler, one deals with magic, and you try to incorporate that, not like any of those elements in particular, but like where,
Just kind of like changing up the play style a little bit, and
yeah.
those are just kind of examples. Yeah, I can see what you mean.
So I do feel that if she did have something to that aside from like just unique, like a unique takedown animation, that it would do more for the player to like, I hate her, but she has this great move. It's gonna be very
Yeah,
hard
she's
for
like,
the player
God,
to
I
like
like.
get out of it.
God, I'm so frustrated with the character, but man, is she so good to play with?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that could definitely be another thing that that could definitely help, especially that kind of transition.
right.
I think that's probably just like the main frustration is that transition
Hmm.
um to Abby. So yeah,
So yeah, I think, like I said, that's about all I really wanted to talk about. I
yeah.
got everything really I want to get down. Is there any final thoughts that you have about Last of Us 2?
Um, I mean, like other than what I've mentioned before, I think I said this earlier, anyways. But I'm like in terms of like a visual standpoint, it is a phenomenally looking game. It is very well detailed, and it's I mean, in general, it's just gorgeous to look at, especially on the beefy PlayStation 4,
Right.
the beast that is the PlayStation 4.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like I said, there is a lot of controversy in this game, but a lot of it is just because of like a lot of it is deserved, but not because it's bad. It's just because
Yeah,
it's like it's a video game, it's interactive,
yeah,
and you can't really tell the same story in the same way like you would in other media. It really has to be tailor made so it feels like
and
a game.
it's not like they didn't make an effort to do something interesting. They obviously
Right.
tried with translating it over to Abby. It just didn't quite work as well as they hoped.
Right.
So,
And
which isn't a bad thing.
yeah.
It's good to see them trying something new.
So that's about everything that we have to say about this. Again, I really do enjoy talking about this, and thank you, John, for chiming in because I really do feel like this could be, this is a lot better of a video, being able to converse it with someone.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for bringing me on.
So yeah, definitely check out John's videos and his webcomic. Check out his live streams. I'm always watching his stuff. I'm always on his live streams, if I'm
Yeah.
not every other live stream. Um,
Like
Good.
you've been around since the start of the live streams, and I've always been appreciative of that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So yeah, check him out. And like I said, I'm also going to link you out to Jeremy Jahns just because he's like one of the big reasons why I wanted to make this video. Just because it's like it's a very unique game, but I do think that is a little more criticized than what it should be. So uh, that'll be it for this conversation. I'm gonna have fun editing this. Thank you
Yeah.
all very much for watching. I am Mr. Rain. I'll see you guys
And
next
I'm
time.
John Cody.
And we'll see you guys next time, whenever that happens.